got me shook from the way.
Hello and welcome back to Hindsight is 50/50. I'm the host J-Rod with my co-host the ORG old retired guy. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Been a it's a great weekend in Michigan for football, even college, both college and pro. Um, and yeah, I love this time of year. I'm sorry that it's we're getting to the end of it, but we're still in the thick of things in the college thing, and that's a good thing. I just we had talked about a couple of different times. We had talked about doing I know we talked about a couple of movies, but I know we had talked about Meet Joe Black.
Yeah.
And I know that I mean, I like that movie. I know you like that movie. So I wanted to, let's not we missed it like for 2 weeks in a row. And I just
Yeah.
didn't, because I know we're going to be talking a lot of football, and I didn't want to get carried away
Yeah,
and
we are.
miss talking about Meet Joe Black. But you know, that I know we had talked a little bit about the premise and about the cast, and Brad Pitt obviously is the lead. Anthony Hopkins is kind of the co-lead, but I don't know if you remember this, but I want to say it was a 1930s film that it was kind of a remake of, called Death Takes a Holiday.
I
That's
knew that was the inspiration, but I don't know that I've actually seen the movie.
Oh, well, dude, I can't watch old movies like that. I mean, the acting's so bad, and the screen, the filming is so bad. And I know that, to movie snobs, that's going to sound terrible, but it's I can't I can't bring myself to watch the
I ha
old movies like that.
I have to be in the perfect setting for that. So if you asked me to watch an old movie that was that old school or silent film or whatever, I would struggle to do it, especially on my own. But one of the things that I guess I was fortunate enough to participate in was I had a film study class when I was in college, and we actually had a theater at the university, and we were or at the community college. We were able to go down, sit in the theater, and watch these on a big screen, and there was a simple test at the end of every movie just to make sure you didn't sleep through class. But other than that, it was more of a film appreciation. And as silly as that may be to have to spend money on, it earns your fine arts credits that you need. And I did get to watch some movies like that to be able to appreciate whether someone went back to black and white in the color era or used a noir style, or even when voice and sound was starting to be added to films, they may have still created a silent film. I got to appreciate those a little bit better, but to just watch them sitting at home, that's pretty brutal.
Well, and I've made it a point to kind of catch up on a lot of what were classics, but I don't know how I define the my time limits on those. But because they don't have to be in color, they do have to be talkies for sure. And I think they are in color. I know for years and years I heard about an Alfred Hitchcock movie called Rear Window with Jimmy Stewart, and I've watched that. And that, again, it's an old movie, but it's very good. And I'm talking about 50s, 60s old. Um, North by Northwest is another one. Lawrence of Arabia is a fantastic movie, but it's 4 hours long, and it's a commitment, so you got to have a rainy day um, to watch that. But so I'm with you. I can't watch like the old
Yeah.
movies. I just can't focus enough. But yeah,
You know
Meet
what
Joe
show
Black and
lost its charm though, of going from black and white to color? I
what
know
did
you can guess it. It's a show. You gotta know what show I'm talking about. That lost its show or lost its charm when it was black and white and it went to color.
Andy Griffith?
Yes, that show was so good, and when it went to color, I am just as unentertained as possible.
Well, but it also changed the cast. That was big when that happened. I mean, Don Knotts left. They were,
But
making
Barney Fife isn't Barney Five, and when it's in color. Like
Yeah,
it's just it's
yeah,
not the
and
same.
I don't think he was only as guest. He only did guest appearances when that show went
Yeah.
to color. But yeah, they changed cast too. But I'm with you. I mean, it's classic in black and white. I still will watch that show. I'll still watch it from time to time. It's on like the Sundance Network or one of those. It's on, and they'll run like multiple episodes, and they only run the black and white ones.
The
So,
other show that's just like that I think lost its charm was Twilight Zone. When
oh yeah,
Twilight Zone
for
was in
sure.
black and white, it was way better in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it just yeah. There's a certain quality, but yeah, Meet Joe Black was based on this older movie called Death Takes a Holiday, and it's the same, obviously the same premise. Brad Pitt, Anthony Hopkins, that Marcia Gay Harden. I can't think of the brother-in-law, or Marcia Gay Harden's husband in that movie. But there are some really good supporting. I can't think of his name. There's some really good supporting actors, but you know, I mean, if you don't know the premise, and by the way, that movie's long too. It is pretty long, but it's not
It's
four.
a 3-hour movie, right?
Yeah, it's not four, but it's like three
Is it
hours long.
is Jack Weber the brother-in-law?
I can't think of his name. I mean, he's had
He plays Drew, the
roles.
guy who's at the company. So I think that's him.
Yeah, he's had roles in everything. He was in Something About Mary. He was, on the Larry Sanders Show that was on HBO and popular with Gary Shandling for a lot of years. Yeah, that guy's been in lots and lots of different shows and
Oh,
movies.
um, Jeffrey Tambor.
There you go.
That's who it
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
Sorry, I was thinking of a different character in the movie, but yeah, it's
yeah.
Jeffrey Tambor.
But it's a good cast, and the premise is that um, the character that ends up Joe Black is actually Death, the entity Death, and he takes over an earthly body that is Brad Pitt's body, and he wants to see what life is, what life as a human is. And so he has to, I mean, one of the cute things in the movie is that he discovers peanut butter, and
Yes.
he loves
Well, he
peanut
doesn't know
butter.
how to eat or walk
Yeah,
or
he doesn't know
anything,
how to
so
eat. He doesn't
he's
know
like
how
a
to
baby.
dress. But he makes a deal because Anthony Hopkins is this, wealthy billionaire guy, and he's gonna die. Well, he makes a deal with him that he'll put it off for a week if he'll put off his death for a week, Anthony Hopkins' death, if Anthony Hopkins will kind of show him the ropes on what it takes to be on Earth and to live. And and obviously he picked a pretty good guy to do it with. He's like a billionaire. So, he lives a pretty good life. He lives, on the Hudson River somewhere, and he's got a beautiful, mansion, and then he flies by helicopter every day to his office. And I think it's New York, but it's just a cool premise of a movie, and watching him and his interactions, and his learning about the peanut butter, about wearing clothes, about all kinds of social interactions. It's really entertaining. And the weird thing is that in a week, he meets Anthony Hopkins' daughter, who is Claire Forjani, I believe is her name. And he falls in love with her as, in this human form of Brad Pitt. He falls in love with this girl who's also a doctor. Um, but it's a really good show with a lot of, again, I appreciate soundtracks of movies a lot.
That soundtrack is
And the
incredible.
soundtrack of that movie is very,
But
very good.
to me, what's so surprising to me about that movie is not, I do love the premise, but it's not the premise, it's the cast. When we're talking about greatest actors of all time, I don't know that I could pick a number one, but like if I said greatest black actor, that's probably Denzel. Morgan Freeman's up in the conversation, but I would have to say Denzel. And then for white actors, for me, it's Anthony Hopkins. I don't think you can do much better than him. I like the intent he has and the attention he grabs when he speaks, and he's still very articulate, and his words are pointed so that when he says something, it can cut deep. It's a dagger. But there's intention there. You feel the intensity of that moment, and with Anthony Hopkins being the father that's the billionaire, you can feel his moral dilemma as he starts to notice Death is falling in love with his daughter, and he wants to be around for that little bit of extra time to kind of get his goodbyes and to leave and make sure all of his affairs are in order. But at the same time, he doesn't want Death anywhere near his daughter. So you can feel the shaky ground he's on. And then when you have Brad Pitt, one of Brad Pitt's greatest qualities that I think sometimes goes unnoticed is his quirkiness, whether it's in Fight Club or whether it's in Meet Joe Black, or I just watched a movie last night about some assassins on a train. One thing he does very well is add a quirkiness or unique quality to his characters, and the fact that they chose him to be the person playing as Death that's learning how to be a human, eating for the first time, going to the bathroom for the first time, all of these things. His quirkiness really embraces that learning part of that role, and then for him to start falling for Claire Forlani, how do you say that? Forlani?
I think it's Foriani.
Okay, Foriani. She is one of those actresses that I don't know how to explain it, but her beauty and her emotion is all in her eyes.
Yes.
And so when they have a conversation, he's got that quirky misunderstanding because he doesn't understand humans. And she's very emotional. So their face-to-face conversations really draw you in. And then Brad Pitt leaves that conversation and goes back to learn from Anthony Hopkins, who's her father. And you feel all this tension building, but I think it's a phenomenal cast, and I don't know that anyone else could have played it better.
Well, and you're right. Anthony Hopkins, I've seen him play good guys and I've seen him play bad guys. And not a lot of people can do both, in my view. Not a lot of people can. There's heroes and there's villains. There are exceptions, but by and large, you're either a good guy or a bad guy, and one of them you do better than the other. Anthony Hopkins does both very well. And you're right. He has a presence, an intensity. When he talks, you listen. And in this story is surrounded in the background by his multi-billion-dollar company. And he's, during this week that he's been granted a reprieve on his death, he's trying to fight a hostile takeover of his company.
Right.
Because he doesn't want it to go that way.
And the board's trying to vote him out and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that, and it's not even a backstory. It's kind of a second story. That's, a big part of that movie, but you're right. Brad Pitt, I like a lot of Brad Pitt movies. I certainly don't like them all, but in this movie, I mean, again, he's learning how to communicate, how to speak. He makes love with a woman for the first time. So there's a lot of things
that he does.
But again,
and he gets, when the real guy gets hit by a car, though, that is one of the best accident scenes I've seen in a movie from that era.
That one is real, and it takes your breath away. I would agree with you on that. When he gets hit by the car, as that guy, that real person who's an attorney in real life, who does a lot of charitable work, and when he's walking down the street and he gets hit by a car, and the death assumes his body,
Yeah.
That scene is breathtaking. That scene will, makes you shudder,
Yes.
at when he gets hit by that car. But, you know, I've seen who else other than somebody who looked like Brad Pitt, and I don't know how old that movie is. Jared, was it 98 or something? It's an older movie. It's been around for a
Yeah,
while.
it was. It was 98.
So, but who else other than Brad Pitt or somebody who looks like Brad Pitt could, f- have a woman fall in love with him and go to bed with her in a week when he just is learning how to speak the language?
Wow, but I mean, you know that Death knew who he was choosing. So I kind of feel like there's a little bit of appreciation there because he does specifically choose a handsome guy
Oh,
and
for
he does
sure.
specifically get himself tied to a billionaire so that he can experience the riches of life
The
as well as
best.
corporate life.
Yeah, the best
Uh,
of both worlds, of all worlds, right? But yeah, it's a really good premise. It makes you think. It makes me think. It makes me wonder, about things like that. I never thought about death being an entity. I mean, I've heard talks about God and about Satan, but I never thought about death being a particular entity of its own. And this movie, I think, makes you kind of, at least think that way. You don't have to believe it, but it makes you think that way. It's a really good movie. Like we said, it's long, but it's a really good movie. Lots of good acting. Um and yeah, it's just I like the premise, and like we said, the soundtrack's really good too.
well, and Anthony Hopkins, I know I keep going back to him, but he's I think it's the undertones and how he's soft spoken, so he draws you in. But anyone who's followed his career, there's movies where when he plays Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you get to see how intelligent he can make a character seem, but some of that is masked by just the eerie creepiness of what's going on in that film. Another example of how good of an actor he is, where he's using his intelligence and he actually is playing the villain, would be a movie called Fracture. And
Yes.
in this movie,
Yes.
he essentially he murders his wife, calls the police, and admits to doing it, and then retracts his statement once he gets into court and tries to fight the case and prove people wrong. Using his intelligence because he's simply that smart and he was bored. And when you see him develop a character in front of you like that, which this movie again, it's 3 hours long. The Meet Joe Black movie is 3 hours long. It gives him even more time, even more stage to build his character to where you really start to feel the emotion. And for anyone who's got the time or can sit through a 3 hour movie, Meet Joe Black is one of the best performances I personally feel like I've seen from Anthony Hopkins because he has that amount of time to build the character and you start to get emotionally involved.
You know, there's a movie that a lot of people would probably make fun of me for liking this movie. And Anthony Hopkins is one of the leads. And you're going to know what movie it is.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you one clue. It has bears in it.
It's The Edge, right?
Yes, The Edge. And he's the same kind of character. He's married to Elle Macpherson. He's a billionaire, and he's married to Elle Macpherson, the beautiful Australian model. And she's a lot younger than him. But he is really, really good in that movie. Now, I'm sure that critically that movie was panned, but I'm also sure that movie made a lot of money because it's one of those that, you kind of, I mean,
Well, he's an intelligent guy that ends up, and I know there's big parts of the plot I'll be skipping on here, but he ends up in a survival scenario. And he's
yes,
one of those people who's done so much reading and just was so curious. And he's such a smart person that although he's a wealthy man that should never survive, he's getting by because he's so smart that he remembers how to make his spear, how to start a fire, and it's just that experience to me is pretty freaking incredible.
How to make a compass out of a paper clip.
Yeah.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah, it's. But you're right. He just has that presence, and in that movie, again, lots of. I'm sure that if you if a movie could get 4 stars, I'm sure that movie didn't get more than 2. I'm sure it didn't. But in my book, if I see that movie on today, I'll watch it. I I liked it that I liked it that well.
Do you know if Meet Joe Black won any awards?
I'm not sure. I, I'm not sure. We can look it up real quick. But that it's a very good movie. Like I said, I like the premise. I like the actors in it. Um,
Okay, I've got
um,
the awards right here.
okay.
So it was a nominees. So best actor Anthony Hopkins, best supporting actress was Claire Forriani, best music by Thomas Newman, sorry. Um, motion picture sound editors nominee, a Razzie Awards nominee, the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards nominee, and then it was a winner of the Bogey Awards in Germany, the I don't know, Saps Nivalo Awards, um, in Golden State, and then it was a Yoga Award. So it actually has, oddly
Those
enough, it
wasn't
has
that the
award.
Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films?
Yes,
Okay, so that wasn't the Academy Awards.
correct.
That was this special Academy, right?
Yes.
But again, I don't. That's how I am with a lot of movies. That's how I am with The Edge. I don't care if I like it, And there's been so many others where you'll hear it wins Best Picture. I can't make it through it. I don't. It's not my kind of movie.
Well, that's
I'm
what I
not
find funny
entertained.
about these awards, though. Is like you have best actor, best supporting actress, best music, but then they have like worst movie scene.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the like the Bogey Awards, I think it's kind of a joke. But when you have the nominee for the Saturn Award, I think those are actually legitimate awards.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I mean, I'm not familiar with them, but I'm sure they are. I I just it's one where we talked about this before. When it comes to like horror and gore and all that, I don't like all the gruesome stuff. I don't particularly like that, but I do like eerie stuff. And this is a lot of eerie because he is death. And even though there's a little bit of comedy in there because of him learning to, when he tastes peanut butter the first time, and then he'll go to the kitchen in this mansion and the help will give him a big spoon of peanut butter and he's walking around licking it off the spoon because it tastes so good to him. But when you see, all of that, and there's little comedy things in there, and there's obviously a love story, and there's a backstory or a second story of all the takeover of the company and all that. But he's, he puts in enough, like you said, whether it's quirky or comedic or whatever it is, he's, he adds a little bit that to that, but it's still like this. He's death, you know. He's death. So there's an eeriness to it, and I'm not saying it changed my faith or anything, but it sure did make me think.
Oh,
But yeah,
it's done well. One of the description I was reading when I was looking at those awards is it explains Meet Joe Black kind of in a nutshell in one sentence. It says Meet Joe Black is a wonderful mixture of comedy, romance, and drama, and is done exceedingly well.
oh,
I don't know that you can describe it much better than that.
no, I would
And
agree
those
with all. I think I
awards,
just said all those things, not as briefly
yeah,
as that, but yeah.
and the Saturn Awards and the Golden Reel were all the genuine awards for Best music, best soundtrack, best actor, and best supporting actress.
Well, I actually downloaded the theme for that, and I have it. I have it on my iPhone. I have the music on my iPhone. That it's such a beautiful theme music and orchestra, lots of French horns, and
And the
it's
final
just.
scene is a tearjerker.
And I think we all, whether we want to admit it or not, I think there's this side of us that we like to see good-looking people with millions of dollars. I think there's a little bit of fantasy in there too. I really do. And this movie's like that, but there's that eerie quality. He is
Yeah,
death, so
that is actually a very good point. I hadn't thought of it till you just said it, but when Death chooses Brad Pitt's character and then essentially forces himself into the life of a billionaire, you do get to experience the what if I won the lottery.
yeah.
And so that part of it is very cool. I didn't know how to express it until you just kind of said that, but you do get to, when you buy a lottery ticket and you go, what would I do if I had this much money? He kind of gets to live that life for a little bit.
You know what? If I have 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 20 minutes after I buy a $2 lottery ticket to think about that, and maybe, in between draws, in between drawings, I might think about it a total of 10 minutes. Maybe it's a total of 2 minutes. I don't know. Whatever that time is, it's worth the $2.
100%. You're
It's worth
buying your
the
imagination.
Yeah, it's worth the $2 to just sit there and think. And, I don't take deep dives and do it because I've never come close. But it's worth it. I do think there's something about that, the fantasy of these good-looking, jet-setting people that live this life that, and everybody's doing fine, obviously, but we don't live like that. And so when you see that, it's there's that fantasy too, and that enjoyment of it.
Meet Joe Black, just I know we talked about the box office, so it actually was a bust at the box office. It had a $90 million budget and only made $40 million. However, it has become a viral sensation since 2019, and it now has grossed 142.9 million.
Oh, there you go.
So it's becoming a sensation.
Well, you don't get all those actors for free, So, and there was a lot of budget. There was that mansion was a real mansion. There was a lot of that wasn't movie sets. So yeah, you don't make you don't put all that together for free, but yeah,
Well, some movies take time to become a cult classic to be appreciated, and I
that's
think this
fair.
might be
That's fair.
a good case
And
of
again, this one, I mean, I like it. You like it. It got panned, but it ended up making money. So, that's
well, and that's a hell of a comeback too. I mean, you're at a
but
$50 million loss, but you end up, 52 million in profit because people are drawn to it over time. That's a hell of a recovery.
But 3 hours is an investment, and I get that. And it's not like it's, an action movie. You have to pay attention, but it's not like it's super fast moving. But if you pay attention, I mean, I was entertained by it. I'll watch it again.
And it's a dialogue movie. It's not an action movie. It's a dialogue.
Absolutely
you got to pay attention. You got to be able to hear. So it's like if the kids are running around, not the movie to watch.
No, and it's for all those reasons. It's long, and it is a dialogue movie. You have to listen. You have to pay attention. For sure.
All right. Well, we're about a half hour in, and I know we wanted to talk about that, and I could talk about movies all day, but I do know that we have a lot of ground to cover on football. You said that you had watched the Lions this past weekend, and you were pretty excited with the outcome of the game and how we handled ourselves. I did not watch that. What did you see that was so unique or special?
Jacksonville, they played Jacksonville Jaguars at home. And Jacksonville has Trevor Lawrence. They have that Etienne guy, who,
From
from
Clemson?
Clemson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he last year, I believe, did his ACL, or anyway, he was out for most of the year. But
Is
he's back
Lawrence
and at full
panning
speed.
out?
They spent a lot of money in free agency. They did. They signed Christian Kirk. They signed this Zay Jones, another receiver. They already had Marvin Jones, who used to be with the Lions.
Is
They
Trevor Lawrence panning out though at all?
You see him. I watch him make plays that I think very few guys can make. Like, he'll throw a ball that's an out that's, the ball's in the air for 40 yards and it's to the sideline and it's on a dime. I never thought he is athletic, but he's also better than 6'5", I believe. I always am afraid of him running because
Get cut in half.
I'm afraid he's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
But in our one of our draft picks in this last year's class sacked him yesterday, and I didn't think he was coming back. It was one of those where he sacked him and he kind of twisted and his ankle went underneath and his knee,
Ooh,
he
shit.
fell backwards. And I thought, well, it's either ankle or knee, but
yeah,
it's
you either
something.
popped your knee or broke your ankle.
Yeah, but he came back. That was one of the last plays before the half. But the Lions, again, they're 5-7. To people out there that are used to following good football teams, they're not going to understand how I am as excited as I am, but I am. I watched
That's good. That's
yesterday.
why we're here talking about it.
I watched yesterday. They beat them 40-14, I believe. They
Holy
dominated
shit.
that game from beginning to end. And I know earlier in the week, Jacksonville was a 3-point favorite. They had just come off either beating the Ravens or the Bills. I think it might have been the Bills. But anyway, they had won the previous week, and it was a big win. And even though the game was at home for the Lions, they were favored. But here's the fun part. Okay. I watched yesterday, Hutch, Aiden Hutchinson played, had a nice game. He had part of a sack. He was our first round pick. Our second round pick, Josh Pascal, he played a lot in the game and he was effective.
Where's he out of?
Kentucky.
Okay.
Our sixth round pick, one of our sixth round picks, is Rodrigo. He started. I thought
That kid's good.
He just played just fine. Another late pick, either sixth or seventh round, a guy named James Houston, who had 2 sacks against Buffalo, and that was his first game. He was on the practice squad all year. He had a sack yesterday. He's the guy who sacked Trevor Lawrence, and I thought half killed him.
What was it? I'm sorry. What was his name?
James Houston. He was out of Jackson State.
Oh, okay. Yes. Oh,
yeah. And I watched these guys, and Kirby Joseph, third round pick out of Illinois, he started. And he was effective. He had a nice game. And and then Jameson Williams dressed. He actually played like half a dozen snaps.
Really?
They only threw the ball at him once, but they wanted to get him out there, and so he played yesterday.
He didn't have a catch.
So it's looking
Dad,
like
I'm sorry, I missed it. Did they throw it at him and it was incomplete, or did he
didn't have a chance. It was a deep ball, and I think Goff kind of threw it short on purpose.
Oh, I gotcha.
But yeah, so he played. So you look at that last year's draft, and that's a pretty good representation of what happened. I mean, Pascal started, Hutch started, Joseph started, Rodrigo started, Houston played in spots. Go back to the previous year, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I can't remember if he had over 100 yards and a TD, and he either caught 11 or 14 balls. And that was last year's draft pick. Aleem McNeil, a draft pick last year at, defensive tackle, had a really nice game. Really nice game.
I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown's one of those guys, though, where he's got a chip on his shoulder anyways, and then he was pissed about the draft. I mean, he
Well,
couldn't believe all those receivers got picked ahead of him. And when you give someone who works hard like him motivation, that you're just going to see incredible things.
he he's not built the same, but he's the same kind of player as Hines Ward. And Hines Ward would block, and Amon-Ra St. Brown will block. He will block. He'll go over the middle and catch the ball. He did yesterday, got rocked a couple of times. Fortunately, it was in the gut, not around the head. And, and he still catches it. And he pretty much catches, if he drops a ball, it's a rarity. Well, then when you see JMO dressed, all of a sudden DJ Shark, who's basically been MIA all year, he had his best game as a Lion. He had almost 100 yards, caught a couple of contested balls. He looked like a different guy. He looked like the guy we signed in free agency that we wanted him to be, but he's kind of been hurt all year. Well, all of a sudden, JMO's dressed and DJ Shark.
Yeah, don't take my job, please.
Yeah. And plus, he's on a 1-year deal, so he's playing for a contract.
But did they play on the same field at the same time?
No,
Or on the
not
field at the
those
same-
two. They're
Because I just wonder how much you said JMO, is that his nickname?
Yeah, Jameson Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was JMO or but anyways, so I just wonder with him being on the field, how much does the cover change? Because he's a burner, and once he gets the ball, he's pure electricity. So it's like, were more people open with him being on the field, even if it was just a bluff?
The first play that I saw him on the field, it was a running play. So he was just out there as a decoy for sure. I really don't think there was an opportunity for him to have a huge impact because he hadn't done anything yet. Everybody knows he's fast, but he still hasn't caught a ball, but he only played 5 or 6 plays.
I mean, there's fast, and then there's these type of receivers fast. That kid's lightning in a bottle.
Oh, he's fast. And then, DeAndre Swift, who, again, your best ability is availability, and he doesn't have a lot of availability. He's hurt all the time. He was healthy yesterday, and he played really well. I always liked him. I liked him at Georgia, but he had those problems then. He was like a soft tissue injury waiting to happen.
And with him, I think part of it is I do think it's almost his effort or his mentality. He will finish a run like he's a big, powerful running back, and he's not. And he will take contact. He is very agile. He's got good hands. But I mean, there are times where he will put his head down, and it's like, buddy, you are not built to withstand this. And I think sometimes, whether it's, running up the gut in the middle of the line or whatever the case is, he gets banged up with those soft tissue injuries because his body can't support the shots that he's trying to put it through. And I watched him do that at Georgia, and I think he does it with the Lions from the little bit that I've seen him play. You'll see him put his head down. It's like, yeah, he might plan a guy if that happens. But when he tries to run through kind of the scrum in the middle and starts taking it to his hamstrings, which are notorious for injuries, or gets rolled up on when he's got weak ankles, it's like, that's not the back your body wants to be, and you're trying to play a different style than you can stay healthy for.
Well, Deuce Staley's called him out a few times on the injuries, and it's not bashful. I mean, it's like if you're unhappy with your playing time, show some of that unhappiness out on the field when you're running.
Right.
But when he is healthy, he is electric, and he was yesterday. You get him in the open field, and he's a good receiver, and you get him out there in space, and that guy's scary good. But, he's got to stay healthy. But, the encouraging thing is that I see all these young guys who I've said before, I think Spielman and Dan Campbell were the same kind of players. Spielman was a better player. He had a better career. But they kind of both did more with less. I mean, I don't know that Campbell was the fastest guy, but he was a rough and tumble tight end, man, and he caught it if you threw it to him. And Spielman just did more. He went in the second round of the draft when he got drafted because he didn't have the measurables, but he was just a football player. And
I think Rodrigo is.
Yes, and I think that's what they want on their team, and you can see it.
But
You can
Rodrigo
see,
is he's a linebacker that he's gifted enough to play, but he definitely doesn't have the measurables of the best that are in the league. But
no,
he's a cerebral player. It's like he watches film, he watches a play develop, and when he hits something, he hits it at 100 miles an hour because he'd rather make a mistake at 100 miles an hour than play it safe and give up a bunch of yards when he was right. And he learns from those, and you can see it time and time again. It's like he's starting to break things down and make those reads where personally what I've seen from him is it's like he knows what to do. Now he's got to get to the point where he's communicating it to the defense fast enough because he will switch without making a call in the middle of a play. He's that type of player where he, again, cerebral player. But once he gets command of that defense and he's able to call out what he's seeing because of the film that he's watched, I think the Lions defense is going to be even better.
well, the encouraging thing is that I see all these young guys that, and I really do believe that both Spielman and Dan Campbell's fingerprints are on this roster. They know the kind of guys they like, and Holmes is smart enough to help get them. So he must be on the same page too.
And you
But I
just,
know that I know what kind of players Campbell and Spielman were, and they were that kind of players.
but with
It's like,
someone like Swift, you just hope you can get him on board. I mean, like
right,
when I look
right.
at DeAndre Swift, I know it's a different sport, but who I would kind of compare it to mentality wise from what you see and the amount of injury and all that, and just kind of, I don't want to call it laziness, but for lack of a better term, I'll say laziness. It reminds me of when the Pistons were good and they had Rasheed Wallace.
Yeah,
Yeah, he might not play today. And then all of a sudden you see that guy show up and everybody goes, "Oh shit." And
yeah.
that's how Swift is. It's like if he decides to play, people are going to be afraid of him because he's dangerous as hell. But
The
you can't always
encouraging
get him to want
thing
to play.
is seeing all these young guys that seem like these guys don't like to lose. They fight. I mean, they fight. They haven't been blown out. New England handled them really well earlier this year. I don't know why. I'm sure there's another game I'm missing here or there, but they gave the Bills everything they wanted, and I think the Bills are pretty good. They gave the Eagles, they gave the Seahawks everything they wanted. They gave the Dolphins everything they wanted. Now, they didn't win any of those games I just talked about, but I think it's a learning process. And when you see the hustle on these guys, and they're all young guys, I love that. And they
Well,
got a lot of fight, and it's fun to watch. But
yeah, they
I
got
didn't
that
want,
effort and they got to learn to win.
yeah, yeah. And I do think it's a cultural thing, and I think that's changing. And I think that's good. This is as excited as I have been about a Lions team in a long time. And we're 5-7.
A
I don't
lot of
know that
people
we're,
are excited though. I mean, I don't watch NFL football. I don't. I think it's kind of become a prima donna league. That's just my opinion. I know a lot of people won't agree with that, and that's fine. But I don't watch a lot of NFL football. And specifically, I had not been watching the Lions for a long time. But because of what's been happening and the turnaround that's there, although I can't sit through a full game live yet because it's just not my thing, um, I have been watching the recaps, and it's their want to be better is making it more of an environment like college football for me.
yeah.
And so it's drawing me back into the NFL as a sport.
Well, they're one of the youngest teams in the league, and like I said, when you this desire, this want to, I really do believe it's infectious, and I think all these young guys, and they're all, I mean, they drafted these guys for more than just ability. They drafted them, I mean, they vet them pretty well. They get their personalities, and they know what kind of guys they want. Now, you're not going to hit on every one of those, but I just named off a few last year. It looks like they've already hit on, and these are good things. It's exciting times, and I didn't want to spend forever on that because I know we got to talk about some college football. Now we had all the college or conference championship games Saturday. Friday, USC lost in the Pac-12 title game, so USC dropped out of the playoff. TCU lost, but they lost close to Kansas State, which, I mean, If people are listening to our podcast, I said that Kansas State had them on the ropes in their regular league game, and they ended up winning in overtime. But TCU still made it. TCU's 3, Michigan's 2. They beat Purdue, and Georgia, thumped LSU, which Georgia can do. And
I
then
thought
Ohio
Georgia got
State,
handed that game early.
when USC lost Friday, and I really do believe, and I mean, I'm not a Buckeye fan. I don't, hate them with a passion like some Wolverine fans do, and I recognize how good of a team they are and how much talent they have, and I think they deserve to be in. I really do. I think they're one of the 4 best. I didn't think Alabama was going to get in with 2 losses, and they didn't. And so it did kind of all shake out. Now it ends up, Georgia will play Ohio State, and that could be very interesting because if Ohio State's right, Ohio State can play with a lot of teams. Now, I know Georgia, when they're right, I don't know how many teams can play with them. We'll see.
But if they get in
Michigan,
a shootout with Ohio State, they're playing Ohio State's game, and that is dangerous.
well, that's it. That you're right. And Ohio State has the talent to score. And they're very explosive.
they want it to be 60-63. Like they're coming out there to do it, and the faster you play, the more no huddle they'll run, and they'll just keep doing it until you get tired. And I mean, Georgia is a monster. They are the most dominant team in college football, in my opinion, but they have a lot of big dudes that hit real hard. And if Ohio State can turn it into a track meet, those guys are going to have to be getting oxygen on the sideline.
Thing about it is that, Michigan really out physicaled Ohio State. They did.
Yep.
They did it last year and they did it again this year. And Georgia, I think, can out physical a lot of teams. So we'll see. But so Michigan's got TCU. And I like that matchup. TCU is a good team. I think Michigan's a better team. I think Georgia will beat Ohio State, but it wouldn't floor me if Ohio State played with them and won that game. And I think Michigan will beat TCU, and I think we'll play in the national title. I think we'll play Georgia. It's too. You can't. You just can't say never. Yeah, I think we should beat TCU, but TCU is a good team, and they've had a lot of
how I
comeback
look at
wins.
it. How I look at it is that against 2 and against 4, so Michigan and Ohio State, TCU is dangerous. They can jump up and bite you. I don't think TCU stands a chance in a matchup against someone like Georgia. And so I thought this year, maybe it shook out just by destiny or whatever you want to call it. But I feel like this year was almost like how you see refs kind of have a makeup call. And that's kind of how I looked at the college football playoff. Is a lot of times it seems like the Big Ten's getting screwed and the SEC's getting favored. And this year, by keeping TCU in, by matching up Ohio State against Georgia first and TCU not dropping from their loss, which to me doesn't make sense because, again, I don't want Michigan, Ohio State to play again before the national championship. But Ohio State's loss is to the number 2 team in the nation. TCU's isn't. So Ohio State should have jumped them, in my opinion. However, I feel like this year was a makeup because the Big Ten, in my opinion, seems to get shafted in the college football playoff. So they're giving the Big Ten 2 shots at the SEC, assuming that Michigan beats TCU.
There's a lot to be said for that. And in the committee, they decide. So, but I really did. I mean, it played out exactly like I thought it played out.
I would have liked to see Tennessee in there instead of TCU, to be honest. And I know they have 2 losses, but I think
they have their quarterback
the
out. They're a different team without. They got Joe Milton now. Hooker's done for the year. So,
but I mean, is their offense that much worse?
Yeah. They're not the same. Hooker could run. Milton can't run. Not like Hooker can. And he was a better passer too.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Milton, he's not the same QB. I know that, but they just had so many weapons on offense that I figured they could kind of hide the QB.
I just really thought it kind of shook out the way I honestly, the way I hoped. I didn't want Bama to get in with 2 losses. I didn't think USC deserved it because they play in the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 is not a physical league like the SEC or the Big Ten. They're just not. And
But if being honest, don't you think TCU should have dropped and Ohio State should have climbed?
I think that might have been a committee decision. Yes, I do. But TCU lost.
It worked out fair this way, but it just
They lost in overtime to a ranked team. I mean, K-State was ranked coming into that game.
Not to 2, though. You know what I mean? Like, that's why. And again, if there were another undefeated team, that's where it would change for me. But with Ohio State's only loss being to the number 2 team in the nation, you would think they would have climbed and TCU would have dropped. But I don't think you want another matchup of the Big Ten championship immediately, because you've already had
Michigan played Georgia last year. They didn't want a rematch of the Georgia-Alabama game, which had just taken place in the SEC championship.
Well, right, because you're punishing those 2 teams for playing a conference championship at that point.
And let's not forget, TCU did lose. They lost to a ranked team that wasn't number 2. I'm not going to remember what K-State was ranked.
I thought they were 12th.
Okay. Ohio State lost to the number 2 team by 22 points at home. I think that's a big deal. And I think there's some of that committee maneuvering, like you said. Ohio State and Michigan just played. If they play again in the title game, that's great. It'll be watched by as many people as any game ever has been, or more.
Well, I also
think they kind of did the same thing they did last year, only this time the Big Ten, like you said, the Big Ten got, I think, favored a little bit.
Yeah, and it was the exact opposite last year, like you were talking about. I was also looking at it from a money standpoint. We talk about how college football and pro football have essentially a license to print money with their networks and all of that. If you do Michigan, Ohio State, yeah, that's going to be big, but I don't think many people are going to pay as much attention to Georgia TCU because they expect Georgia to just destroy TCU. But if you move the bracket around like they have now, people are going to tune in to Georgia Ohio State. People are going to tune in to Michigan TCU and see if TCU can jump up. And then if it ends up being either Ohio State or Michigan or Georgia Michigan, you're going to have, essentially out of the 4 games, at least 3 of them are probably going to be your largest viewer or watched games this entire season with those matchups, as to where if you have Michigan, Ohio State, you might lose a lot of interest, especially in the Midwest. Once one of those teams loses, because we'll feel like we just got screwed again. And people, I do think people get tired of hearing and seeing the SEC, and I think if Bama would have made it in, that'd have put a bad taste in their mouth. But with the bracket set the way it is, although I'm not the biggest fan of it, with the bracket set the way it is, I do think these games are set up to have the highest amount of viewership that they could.
Well, in 2024, 2025, they're going to 12 teams.
They're going to 12, and do you know if they have released what they plan on doing or not? Or
I saw a projection of what it is. The top 4 teams get a bye.
What I was hoping they would do is they're going to 12 teams. So what I was hoping they would do is do 2 teams. So take the Power 5 conferences, and make the the conference championship the first round of the playoff, and take 2 at-large teams and they play each other as a championship.
Well,
and that would be the whole first round.
I saw and again, this isn't etched in stone, but I saw the proposed layout on, here we go. I'm just looking it up right now. I saw the proposed layout for the 12 teams, and I remember the top 4 teams were going to have a bye. And I'm trying to find out. What a 12-team playoff would look like this year. let's see. The top 6 conference champions are guaranteed a spot in the tournament, regardless of their final ranking, with the top 4 given an opening round bye. The better seed in each of the remaining matchups will host the opening round contest on its campus. So, of those, the top 4 get a bye, and then the better seeds of the top 12 of those remaining 8 teams will host the better seeds will host the games.
So wouldn't it behoove you then as a conference to cancel the conference championship?
Well, okay, so this year the byes would be Georgia, Michigan, Clemson, and Utah because they're conference champions. Game number 1 would be Tulane at TCU. Game number 2 would be Penn State at Ohio State. Game number 3 would be USC at Alabama. Game 4 would be Kansas State at Tennessee.
So almost all of those would be a fucking rout.
I don't know. K-State
I mean,
and
maybe
Tennessee
Tennessee if their QB isn't there, but let's just assume that the QB potentially was healthy by that game.
I don't know.
That's
That's just saying
rout.
that all that is what it would look like this year, and that's the first round. So
They've been devaluing conference championships ever since the playoff came around to the point where you are being punished for playing one. Like after Michigan beats Ohio State this year, playing against Purdue can only injure players or hurt your status for the college football playoff. There's no fucking reason to play it. But if they were to rework the conferences to make sure that the best teams are split between East, West, North, and South, whatever you want to call it, and then they made it to where the conference championship was the first round of the playoffs for the Power 5 conferences. That's 10 out of your 12 teams. You take the 2 at-large teams that they have a play in together. I feel like you'd bring back that value to the conference championship, which I think needs to be there.
well, it's all about money, and the
'Cause your
conference
crossover
championship
games are more important
creates
now.
a lot of revenue for the conferences. By the way, I think it's more than talk. I don't know that there's a deadline set, but the Big Ten, like once USC and UCLA come in, they're not going to have divisions anymore. The 2 highest ranked teams in the Big Ten will play for the conference championship. That's how it'll work. It's not going to be the East Division against the West Division anymore.
Are
I
we
did
ever
hear-
going to add a good team, or are we just going to keep fucking around?
I don't know.
I mean, we got like Maryland,
know,
and Rutgers, and USC and UCLA. It's like, oh, that cool. I'd
Well,
rather
the
have
SEC
Kansas State.
The SEC is adding Texas and Oklahoma, so we had to do something. So we added USC and UCLA as far as the Big Ten goes. But the Big Ten championship game, just wanted to touch on that briefly. Michigan did what Michigan does in the
Annoyed
second
the
half.
hell out of me.
What?
Annoyed the hell out of me.
No,
I mean,
they imposed their
sleepwalk.
will. They imposed their will in the second half. They did. That's what they do. And I sent you a text that I had sent.
You're not going to be up 14-13 on Georgia in the national championship. You're going to be down 40-0 and then go, oh, we can't catch up because you
Jared,
sleepwalked the first
I
half.
understand that. But I sent you a text. I sent you a text that I had sent Jack the satellite guy because he asked me, he goes, what do you think's going to happen today? And I sent you a copy of that text I sent him. I
Yep.
said, I think Purdue's going to hang for a bit. I said, they might even lead in the first half. And then I said, I think we'll win the game by more than 10 points. Well, that's exactly what happened. We won by a little more than I thought. But I agree with you. You pussyfoot around like that with Georgia, you'll be down 28-0 at halftime.
But the
you're
worst part is this year is different than what I've seen in other teams that do this. Normally, there are teams that are very dominant, but they sleepwalk, and you got to wake them up. And once you poke the bear enough times and it wakes up, then the other team goes, oh, shit. and they get shit on because the dominant team takes over. But with Michigan, we don't play Michigan football in the first half on either side of the ball. It's like it's all a ploy, and we play 100% different play calls, different structures on defense, sometimes even different players. And we are a totally different team in the second half. Like we were trying to guide you into this disguise going into halftime, and then we come out and actually execute our real plan and shit on you. I mean, we're outscoring people. Yeah, I'm not going to have the number right, but it's got to be close to 200 points now in the third quarter.
Right.
And it's
Well,
you got to get on the board in the first half. And I mean,
I-
the Ohio State game, we get lucky early on because Ohio State didn't execute on a couple of their possessions right after they scored. If we did not shut them down, Ohio State's up 21-0 right away in that game. And it turns into one of the routes that's happened in the past.
Well, they do and the thing about it is, and I give this staff credit, they do make adjustments, especially defensively. Especially
Let's make them in the
at-
second quarter, though. Let's not make them
No,
at half.
I understand that. But yeah, so at any rate, they did what they do. They ended up imposing their will. They ended up winning, going away. All things are good. 2 conference titles in a row, 2 appearances in the college football playoffs. Now, I told you.
2 wins against Ohio State. That's
What-
huge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I told you I've been watching these, the post game press conference of the opposing coach after Michigan games.
Yes.
And I watched Jeff Brom, who's the coach of Purdue. I watched his post game press conference. He did what every other coach other than Ryan Day has done. Now, and Jeff Brom and Jim Harbaugh are not without a history. Before COVID, a Michigan player, we were playing at Purdue and somebody got hurt. Well, a Michigan player got hurt. And Harbaugh made no beef about, or he didn't keep it a secret that he was not very happy with Purdue's facilities, their treatment facilities. Because it was somebody who got hurt, and I think they ended up having to go to the hospital. And then he and Brom kind of sparred back and forth over that. Brom said, our facilities are fine, which I'm sure they are. Like I said, Harbaugh can be a prickly pear. And we talked about how he's changed, and I believe that he has. But I watched Brom's post game, and he did what I think every other opposing coach has done all year to Michigan, and that's, 12 wins later, whatever it is. We haven't lost the game yet. And they all, other than Ryan Day of Ohio State, gave Michigan credit. Jeff Brom did too. So he didn't let whatever personal thing that they have, if they still have something between he and Harbaugh, he didn't let that come in between that and recognizing that. He goes, that's a really good team.
Because he's not a piece of shit.
With really good players and a really good coach. And, they stopped us when they needed to. They made us get 3 when we should have gotten 7. And it's like, against a team like that, you can't do it. So he did.
I mean, we're not on national TV. We don't have to be censored around here. It's because he's not a piece of shit. When someone hands your shit back to you, you go, man, I thought we were good, but boy, they did whatever the hell they wanted.
They handed us
you
our
owe
shit
them
back
that.
to us.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you can't admit that, that's not just being a sore loser. You're a piece of shit.
Well, that again, Ryan Day is the only coach that wouldn't, and all year. And I mean, that there are coaches in the Big Ten I don't like. I don't like James Franklin at all. And he was, and Bielema
I
is a
didn't
hard
like
guy to
Harbaugh
like.
till he started to soften up. It has nothing to do with Ryan Day being the Ohio State coach. It has
No.
to do with the fact that if your lunch is handed to you and you can't acknowledge the other team, you don't deserve to be there. Get off the field.
And but again, I've just made it a habit of doing that now. And like I said, everybody but Ryan Day has acknowledged that, you know what, they're a really good team. They got really good players and a really good coach. And I mean, again, Mike Morris didn't play in that game. Blake Corum didn't play in that game, just like Ohio State. I mean, so we were without Schoonmaker
I'm
barely played in
still
Ohio State. He was a much bigger factor in this game
I
because he's
think I'm
healthier.
more on the train that although I think he's a great person and a great athlete, we are more dangerous without Quorum because we don't lean on him.
Well, that's fair. And I miss his
And Edwards
toughness,
is more
and I don't know where this
explosive.
Mullins kid came from. I mean, he was a linebacker and now he's in the backfield.
The
Man, he
hammer,
runs
yeah.
he runs with a little bit of attitude.
Well,
And I
what
like
they
that.
said, he's like a natural 230. Like he has to cut down to 230 pounds.
Yeah.
And
And
it's like, well, that's a big fucking boy right there. And he is a hammer. But Edwards, to me, I mean, he's not the jump cut or the shifty. He's a one cut guy. I remember when I was a kid that the big one cut guy was Arian Foster when he went to the Texans. It's
Yep.
like he makes one move, picks a line, and fucking explodes. And he might not outrun everyone on the field, but if it was supposed to get him 10, he'll get 30.
Well,
And that's
if you
what
compare him
Edwards
to the
does.
Lions, Jamal Williams is that. He's a hammer and he's fast, but he runs with power. DeAndre Swift can, make one guy fall on his face and then make another guy fall on his face when he's healthy. So I totally get it. I do think Corum ran with more power, runs with more
Way
power
more
than
authority on the field. He scares people.
he runs. I think he runs with more power than Donovan Edwards, but Donovan Edwards is fast and he's just fine. I'll take a bunch of guys like
Corum
that.
too is so strong and so short, compact.
Yeah.
That even when he's at an upright sprint, I think it's tough to beat him in leverage.
Oh, for
And so he
sure.
bounces off, and he's got that. You've seen it in other big leg running backs, and I'm not talking the shiftiness like Barry or anything like that, but Barry Sanders had huge thighs. And you see this with stocky running backs like Corum is, where when they start running, they almost get a little more bow-legged.
Yeah.
In that wide base with their leverage from being short. It's like, you better wrap up because he'll bounce right off.
Well,
And I think Corum does that very well.
And we've talked about this before. He's not Barry Sanders. I wouldn't claim that. But he's built he's him physically. He's the exact same size as Barry Sanders was. Now, he's not him. He can't do all those things, but he's a darn good back and I wish he was
His
playing,
patience
but
is incredible.
I wish he was playing, but you know what? I think we're going to be just fine. Just, I wanted to real quick touch on there was a thing in the news, and it always happens. I mean, recruiting weekends, they always say Harbaugh's going to the pros. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I don't believe Jim Harbaugh's going anywhere. He
I
came out
will
and
give it a
said
0% chance.
he came out and said he's not. I
He's built
think
the culture here. This is
he
home now.
has, and I think he's going to reap the benefits and continue. He's on a roll, and I think he wants to keep it
And
going.
we talked about how something has changed. Not only has he, we talk about getting softer as you get older, but as he has broken through, what was left for him when he got here. Okay. Everybody thought, oh, here comes Harbaugh, sunshine and rainbows. And it's like, no, we were dog shit for the better part of a decade. And then he came in and started to slowly make us better. And we had a few setbacks. COVID didn't help anybody. But he's finally broken through that layer of like, God, I've just got to grind and get through the bullshit. And now he's on the other side of, this is the place I want. I've got to shape it the way that I see fit. And he's a happy guy. And you can just see.
He seems a lot happier. He really does.
I think it comes off of him. You can just tell with his energy that he's in a place he wants to be.
But if you and I are at an opposing school or fans of an opposing school, and we can leak it that NFL teams are looking at him, he's already coached in the NFL with great success. And by the way, this weekend coming, a big recruiting weekend. So
oh yeah, I think that's what it was.
This
Was a
was a
ploy.
plant by, I don't know by who, but it could be by anybody. But I don't think there's any truth to it. I agree with you. I think he's happy with where this is. I think he is enjoying it. And I think he's going to continue to enjoy it because he's building a monster, buddy. He's
And I
building a
agree. I
monster.
think it's somebody trying to take advantage of the emotions and the lack of fact checking of high schoolers. Someone
Yeah.
is trying to get someone to go, wait, Harbaugh's leaving, and change their commitment.
Oh, that's exactly it. It's a big
I
recruiting
completely
weekend.
agree with you on that.
This is exactly it.
I did want to touch on Corum though, because you tend to dive into this stuff a little bit deeper than I do. And for anyone who's a Michigan fan out there, it seemed like his injury was not that serious in the Illinois game, but he tried to come back against Ohio State and couldn't. And then he didn't dress last week against Purdue. And what I read earlier was that he actually had surgery on his knee and is done for the season.
Yes.
So, do you have any more information on that?
No, and I enjoy this part of Harbaugh. He doesn't like the media, and I don't blame him. And it's kind of like the NHL, the National Hockey League. They joke about he has a lower body injury, he has an upper body injury, and that's how Harbaugh is. He does the exact bare minimum on what he has to say. He gets with their sports information.
Guess we'll find out at game time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've had 8 knee surgeries, and all of them on one knee. I've had ones that, I walked out of the office. I've had ones where I was on crutches for a week. I've had ones where I was in a cast for 6 months. But I think this one was something, it may have been, I don't think it was an ACL. I don't.
I think it was a meniscus.
It could be that cartilage. It could be a ligament.
What I've seen in previous injuries, though, the reason I guess that it's a meniscus is that usually you can run on a torn meniscus, but it is going to hurt. But you're at a point where you're going to keep micro tearing it, so you might do a little more damage, but because it's already torn, there's not a whole lot worse that can be done, and because of what it is and how it acts inside of your knee, it's not a major support or part of the integral structure of your knee. So I've seen that before where people have surgery and they're back a week later, or if it's got to be trimmed up and you kind of destroyed your meniscus, you can go if you want, or you can get the surgery now and you're looking at 6 weeks or more.
I haven't heard anything other than what you've heard. I do know this: Blake Corum's going to make a lot of money next April, and I think he'll, he wanted to get this out of the way. I think that's why he did it so quickly.
So do I.
And you know what?
Good for
if
him.
it was minor, if it was minor, he might be dressed in January or December 31st. If it was minor. He might be,
but with what he put together this season, he can really only hurt himself.
I would agree with you. His
draft stock could not go up. So if I was him, I'd say, yeah, there's let's say it's a 20% chance of re-injury, or I can get the surgery now, rehabilitate, and explode at the combine. If I sit down with Coach Harbaugh and Harbaugh's like, this is your future. This is your financial future. You need to make this decision for you. This team will survive without you. We'd love to have you, but we've got guys here. We know you trust in your brother Donovan to carry the rock. So if this is what you need to do for your future, do it. If he sat down and had that conversation, which I think he did, I would choose to sit out as well, because you can't help your draft.
I wouldn't blame him. I would not blame him at all. And maybe it's serious enough where he couldn't play anyway, but I'm with you.
To make it to the national championship, we'll find out, right?
Go get your money. Go get your, there you go. Go get your money. Go get your money. You earned it. You did great things for the program, and you earned it. But again, I just think this Harbaugh to the pros thing, he may prove me a
For
liar tomorrow, but I don't think so. I think this is all, a smokescreen that was a plant from somebody or by somebody with a purpose to discourage recruiting. And I think that's all it was. And I think he's genuinely seems happy here. He's having a ton of success. And, I don't think he's going
I also
anywhere. And
think
I'd be
Harbaugh's
shocked if he did.
I think he's smart enough to realize that he can't have the type of control in the NFL that he can have here.
Oh, for sure.
And I think
Absolutely.
for someone with a personality like his, even though he's happier and softening, knowing that his word is the final say, I think goes a long, long way. And
And he's
now that
got
his program's good, he's got no reason to leave.
a AD that's in lockstep with him. Ward Manuel, I'm not sure if they played together, but I know they both played for Bo. And I
Well, and
think
his
they may have even
contract's
been on the same
phenomenal.
team.
I mean, didn't he make 1.5 million from beating Ohio State?
I
Or
don't
was it the
know.
Big Ten champion? One of the
I don't
two. But his
know.
bonuses are incredible in his deal
Yeah.
that's structured.
And in years past, he's given those bonuses to his assistants. In past years, he's done that. So again, I don't think he's going anywhere. I know we're getting, we've been on for a while, and I know we had mentioned talking about, an Allen story, and I mentioned I wanted to share an Allen Chicago story, and you had said that you had a Melissa, your wife Melissa, and you a Chicago story that you wanted to share. So why don't you enlighten me? I'm sure I may have heard it, but
Probably.
let's
And
hear it.
it's not one of those stories that is just filled with hilarious moments or anything like that. It's just one of those bad timing. Of course, this would happen to me things. So Melissa and I, a few years back, got invited to a wedding that was in Chicago in the Sears Tower. Well, I hadn't been to Chicago other than to see Joe when he was at Shriners Hospital. So I hadn't actually got to explore the city or enjoy anything that was there, as well as who wouldn't go to the Sears Tower if they had the opportunity. So we decided to go out there and travel, and we went to the museum and all these other things, and those are stories that I can share another time. But we had decided that since neither one of us had stopped to see the city, that we were going to walk. We were going to go to these places, and I like an idiot assumed that we would just cut down the list since we were walking. But if you know my wife Melissa, the more she can do, the more she's gonna do.
And she's a walker too, man.
She is, but she gets this rejuvenation, this energy from the excitement of experiencing something new. So she's the type of person that you could go somewhere and it could be a shitty place and a shitty event, and she had a blast because you went. You made the trip to go. As to where I want to do something that's fun, I don't care if it's at home or not. So she wants to see everything. That's the big part for her. So I'm in. Let's do it. Well, we start off and we walk to one of the amusements that we went to go see. Then we walk to the museum. Then we walk from the museum to the Bean in Chicago. Then we walk to the Magnificent Mile, and we go in all the shops and walk all the way down the Magnificent Mile and back. And then we walk all the way back to our hotel room. That's a lot of concrete. That is a lot. And
Yeah.
I'm talking mid-walk, feet hurt so bad, we stopped at the Nike store and bought new shoes. Like, that's a lot. So from where we were at, it was about a 4.5-hour drive to Chicago. We showed up midday, maybe early afternoon, and we walked the entire afternoon. We got up the next morning and we finished the rest of like the tourism stuff and walked all day. Not only did we have that, we had I don't know if you guys have ever been to a Chicago hotel room, but our bed was pretty much touching the walls all the way around. That's you get like a 1x1. You can't even, like, you could wash your hands while sitting on the toilet in the bathroom. I mean, it's just everything is that small. You can fit about one duffel bag between the edge of your bed and the bathroom door. So there wasn't even a good place to rest. So we were out and about the whole time. Then we go to the wedding. Once we get to the wedding, our feet are killing us. Well, we get in the Sears Tower. It's standing room only. And so you have to stand there for every single person who's been invited to go through security and go up the elevator, all the freaking floors in the Sears Tower. And I think we were more than halfway up. So you get there and you're thinking like, okay, I got here a reasonable amount of time. We stood there for 45 minutes. Well, then everyone has to get ushered from there to where the ceremony is going to be. So by the time you get to sit down, it's been an hour and a half. There's still no chairs when you're waiting that whole hour and a half, even though you've been ushered over. You don't get to go sit down for the ceremony. So now you're standing in the room where the ceremony is going to happen. And it was probably another 20 minutes to half hour. It got so bad. All of the moms and stuff, because we weren't the only ones who went around and explored Chicago, they were taking their shoes off. Like 90% of the wedding was barefoot. And so, I mean, we're sitting there and we're just dying. So then we sit down for a ceremony, and it's one of those long ceremonies where people got 10 pages for their speech and all that. We have to get moved to our tables after that. Standing room only for another hour.
Oh.
I
That's
looked at
rugged
my
duty,
watch.
man.
I looked at my watch the next day. I had a Fitbit on. And I looked at Melissa and I go, you know, sometimes I say you lunge me like a horse, but this is ridiculous. In that, day and a half? 27 miles.
Wow.
My
Yeah,
feet hurt for 2 months.
Oh, dude, there's no way. I mean,
My feet hurt for 2 months.
I couldn't do anything remotely like that.
Well, and then you got a 4.5-hour drive home and you're like pushing the gas
Oh.
pedal. It's like, that hurts. I'm going to hit the
Oh.
cruise. 27
Now, how
miles.
did she hold up okay?
Yeah, she did fine.
She was still raring to go?
Yeah. I mean, well, she was tuckered out, but like that's the other part of driving, right? Is she gets to fucking sleep.
Yeah.
So she slept part of the drive there until we got to the city when it was important. She did the same thing on the way back, and Melissa's just one of those people, like, you could lay her down on concrete stairs and she'll fall asleep. So when we were in that hotel room, she was just fine. Not to mention, when there's an occasion, my wife likes to get hammered, so she passed out and rested real good. But
Well,
the wedding was nice. We had a good time. The museum was awesome, but the walking was insane. I know that was long-winded, but I thought it was
No,
worth
that's
sharing.
crazy. I just remember you had sent us an audio recording of when you and Melissa got back to the room, because she'd had a few pops.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
She said some expletives that I won't share, but just one of the things was she kept telling me, and I don't remember when we were in Chicago, but I can tell you it wasn't the same time of year. But she kept telling me that we were going to be in the Thanksgiving parade the next day. We were going to be in it, and we needed to be there in Detroit. And it's like, we're in Chicago and we're months and months away. What do you? He's like, no, we're in it.
I remember the audio. I don't remember specifics, but I remember it being cute. When I want to say we were in our 30s, my buddy Alan and I did a guys' weekend. He was, at that time, he was living in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we were, I think, in Manchester. But anyway, I went over there and we just had a guys' weekend. I think we went over there and maybe had an afternoon and then an evening, and we stayed. I want to say we stayed one night. We might have stayed two, but doesn't matter. Anyway, so we go to this. I've heard people, I'm not even sure. I think it's called the Chicago Field Museum or he said the Museum of Natural History. I don't know if there's a difference. If if there is, then I don't know
I
which
think they're the
one.
same museum, but they're split into two sections, I think.
Okay. So I mean, and we, he's really into that kind of stuff, and I am too. Not as much as he is, but I am too, and I'm certainly willing. So, we go through this museum and it takes a long time. And it's a big place. And we had gotten kind of towards the end after spending a while there. And we had gotten towards the end of the tour. And, and we didn't go with a tour guide. We went by ourselves. And so we're at the end of all the exhibits. And I remember there being all this jewelry that was, from all over the world, different stones from every place. And they were in all these cases. And there was this kind of a little alcove where this was that was off kind of the main hallway. And on the edge of that alcove, there was like on the edge of the main hallway, there were two life-size statues of, I don't know if they were Dinka or Watusi tribesmen. They're like 7-foot tall guys, which I know the Dinka are
Surprised
really
you can pronounce it.
super tall, and they're just jet black ceramic statues so you didn't have like facial features on them. I mean, you could see everything was black on the statues, and they're like huge, and they're on a platform. So I mean, they're like
So it was
waists
just showing off like their cloth and jewelry and all that? Like their attire?
I have no idea why those two statues were there, but they were at the doorway into this place that had all these stones and gems from all over the place. And there was a little table by the jewelry that had these postcards. And it was like a donor card where it was telling you, this was before the days of the internet. Like I said, I was in we were in our 30s. So this is 30 some years ago. This is before the internet was active. And it was a way that you could donate money to the Field Museum. And so Alan picks up one of these cards. I don't know what he's doing with it, and if he was going to donate or what, but he picks up one of the cards. And so we're standing there at this doorway by these two giant Dinka tribesmen statues. And he's got that postcard in his hand. And we're talking about, what do you want? What kind of food do you want to eat? Where are we going to go next? All this stuff. And I look, and again, these are pretty, I mean, they don't have like facial features you can see. And they had like a little loincloth, a ceramic loincloth that covered their front. So you didn't see their genitals or anything. And in the back, it was like a naked butt, But again, these are all black and they're giant. And I'm standing there, we're talking, and I look, and he's got this card, this donation card, and he's running it up and down the crack of while he's while he's talking to me. And he's acting like nothing's happening.
Oh, God. Just a credit card swipe, huh?
It's like, well, yes, yeah. It's like swiping a credit card up and down this giant statue.
I'm really struggling to donate money here. Oh man.
And and again, when I see him doing that, and he's like doing it like he's not even thinking about anything. Like he's like doing that on the side, like twiddling your thumbs or something.
You know who fidgets like that? Jacob, my oldest brother.
Yeah.
They both do weird shit. Like,
yeah,
of course,
and
he's
again,
rubbing it through the crack.
He's a playful guy, and he'll do stuff that's out there. But I was just totally, I mean, I started like cracking up. I go, what in the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh.
It fit.
Like he was surprised that he got caught and he didn't know he was doing anything wrong. But yeah, so
there's a crevice here, so I played with it. That's Alan.
Well, Okay, so I sent you a text the other day, just real quick. It's along the same lines, a story along the same lines. Uh, I sent you a text and I sent it to all you boys, and I was dying laughing because your mom and I were watching the college football playoff show, and again, little bits and pieces of it. And I was telling her, I said, well, we got TCU. She goes, well, can we beat TCU? And I go, yeah, I think we could beat TCU. And she goes, well, is Ohio State going to beat Georgia? And I go, I don't think so. And she goes, well, okay, can we beat Georgia? And I just I'm looking at her and she goes, or are they going to crack our ass? It's like, I guess
Oh,
they're going to crack our ass.
yeah, she's great at mixing stuff. Well, that's where we got the podcast name from.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
just great at having those little mix-ups.
Yeah.
Those
Are they, not are they going to beat our ass? Not are they going to, crack us good, but are they going to crack our ass? And
that's gonna be her legacy, is just dropping those gems all over.
well, and to her credit, in this case, she actually caught herself doing it. And she goes, crack her ass. And I
Yeah.
go, I'm going to tell the boys about this.
Yeah, for sure. Never gonna live that one down.
Well, it's
No,
just
those
another one in a
stories.
long line. But
Well, there's
anyway,
a couple things I wanted to say. One, it is the Chicago Field Museum of Natural History.
okay.
So both were the same thing, and they do have it split up between science and history. Two, next episode, I would like to talk about the lions that are at the Chicago Field Museum. I think that will tie in really well to a movie we can talk about called Ghost in the Darkness.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, I love museums. I'm probably one of the worst people to take to one because I can get trapped there for hours. But the lions that are there, I just thought it's a really cool story. There's some stories that'll stem off of that as well, and I just thought that was great. And then one additional note that I will have to tell is a funny story for next time. There was an employee or a new hire that I had to train and work with at a previous business that I worked at, and he left me little gems. Just how mom has those mistakes when she speaks sometimes. He would do things that it was just like bonehead. And you're like, no, what in the hell? Like, how did we get to this conclusion? And there was one in particular that is a great story that I've got to share with you next time.
Okay.
So
Okay.
on that note, though, I think it's a good time to wrap up. I'm not trying to cut you off. Is there anything else you wanted to share or anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I'm good, and we'll have another movie to talk about next week, and the transfer portal opened today, so there's going to be a lot of people
Ooh.
transferring. There already has been.
Well,
And
your
there's gonna
guy
be-
Cade's going to be gone, right?
Yeah, and that's okay. That's fine.
Do you have an idea where he's going to go?
Oh, Iowa. He's already going to Iowa. And
he's
by the
already-
way, Iowa will be a lot better with him because they didn't have a quarterback this year.
100%.
Yeah. But anyway, so we'll have that to talk about. We'll have a movie to talk about. We'll have lots of other things that we can get to next week.
Sounds good. Well, on that note, to all of our listeners, we appreciate you making it this far and continuing to come back. If there's anyone you think would be interested, please feel free to share this. We'd love to spread the word and make this a bigger podcast. If you have any comments or topics that you would like us to talk about, questions you may have of something we covered, please let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback. If there's a certain platform you would like us to expand to that it is easier to engage on, or you're more likely to listen, please share those as well. But other than that, be safe, be smart, make good choices, and peace out. Love you, Dad.
Love you too, buddy.
Bye.
Bye.